South Africa witnessed a day unlike any other in its modern political history. A day that began in routine predictability but erupted into a national spectacle that will be debated for years to come. What was meant to be a standard parliamentary sitting unexpectedly transformed into one of the most explosive confrontations the National Assembly has ever seen. Lawmakers arrived expecting a heated yet ordinary debate, but within minutes, the chamber became the center of an unprecedented political firestorm, one that laid bare the country's deep anxieties, frustrations, and mounting disillusionment. It was a moment when the cracks in South Africa's fragile democracy widened in plain view, revealing a nation at a volatile crossroads. The catalyst for the upheaval was the opposition MP, whose unexpected demand shattered the rhythm of the session and electrified the chamber. In the midst of a tense exchange over corruption and government accountability, Money rose and delivered a thunderous declaration that stunned both allies and rivals alike. With live cameras broadcasting to millions and the entire nation watching, he called for the immediate arrest of President Ramaphosa right there on the parliamentary floor. The intensity of his accusation and the audacity of demanding the president's arrest inside the National Assembly provoked instantaneous shock. Within seconds, the chamber dissolved into uproar as MPs leapt from their seats, shouting, cheering, condemning, and hurling accusations across the aisle. The speaker's gavel repeatedly hammered the podium in a desperate attempt to restore order, but her appeals were swallowed by a tidal wave of voices. Chairs rattled, papers flew, and security personnel lingered tensely at the edges of the hall as the pandemonium grew. This was not mere political theater. It was an eruption fueled by years of swelling frustration, a mirror of the silent storms brewing across South Africa, a country that had long teetered between hope and despair, stability and revolt, patience and breaking point. The emotional crescendo inside Parliament reflected the rage of a population exhausted by stagnation, corruption, and broken promises. To understand why Money's outburst detonated such intense reactions, one must look beyond the parliamentary walls and into the wounds cutting through South Africa in 2025. The country remains trapped in a suffocating cycle of economic stagnation, staggering unemployment, relentless inequality, and ceaseless corruption scandals that have eroded public trust. Unemployment remains stuck at 33%, with youth unemployment reaching a devastating 60%, leaving millions of young South Africans feeling abandoned by their leaders and locked out of economic opportunity. Load shedding, despite years of promises to eradicate it, continues to choke the country's growth, damaging homes and throttling businesses. The power cuts have become a symbol of dysfunction, a nightly reminder of a nation struggling to keep its lights on both literally and politically. Economic inequality, measured by a Gini coefficient of 0.63, the highest recorded globally, casts a long, unshakable shadow over every community. It is a constant reminder that South Africa remains far from achieving the dream of a fair and just society imagined at the dawn of its democracy. In this climate of despair, President Ramaphosa, once celebrated as the leader who would guide South Africa into a new era after the corruption-plagued Zuma years, now faces growing disillusionment. The hope he once inspired has faded, replaced by skepticism and a sense of betrayal. Scandals trailing his presidency have only worsened public frustration. The lingering fallout from the controversial Orphans Cash saga, widely known as the failure affair, continues to haunt him, with allegations of undeclared foreign currency hidden on his property refusing to fade despite attempts to downplay them. More recently, the Madlanga Commission, established by Ramaphosa in July 2025 to investigate corruption within law enforcement, has turned into a political powder keg. Instead of reinforcing his anti-corruption stance, the commission has unleashed testimony so explosive that it threatens to devour the very administration that created it. Among the most damaging testimonies came from National Police Commissioner Fanny Mamola, who claimed under oath that he had personally warned about the consequences of disbanding anti-crime units and the rising infiltration of criminal syndicates into police structures, warnings he said the president ignored. These accusations sparked questions about whether the president's failure stemmed from incompetence or intentional neglect. It was against this backdrop of controversy that Money's explosive accusation landed, a spark hurled into a country drenched in political gasoline. When Money shouted, "Arrest him now," many South Africans felt he was voicing what they had muttered privately for years, that the president was no longer untouchable. On the opposition benches, cheers erupted instantly. MPs pounded their desks, chanting for justice, treating the moment as the opening salvo of a long-awaited reckoning. Meanwhile, ANC loyalists recoiled in fury, shouting back at Money and accusing him of undermining democracy, peddling lies, and resorting to reckless populism. The clash of voices grew so intense that at moments it appeared physical confrontations were imminent. Within minutes, the incident spilled beyond the parliamentary walls and into the digital veins of the nation. Social media erupted with clips, commentary, and hashtags. The phrases #Seresta, #ArrestRiosa now, #MoneyUprising, and #Palicos trended across the country. Millions watched the footage replayed in real time. Opposition figures such as Julius Malema and Gayton McKenzie seized the opportunity, amplifying the outrage through fiery posts and live streams. McKenzie even went as far as claiming that an international arrest warrant for the president was imminent, a baseless claim, yet one that found fertile ground among citizens desperate for accountability in a political landscape they feel has betrayed them. Across the nation, in taxi ranks, university lecture halls, rural radio call-ins, factory cafeterias, and WhatsApp groups, the incident became the topic of heated debate. For many citizens, Money was not just an MP acting out. He had articulated the simmering anger of a population fed up with corruption and false promises. Others saw his actions as irresponsible, a dangerous attempt to incite instability by dragging Parliament into a popular spectacle. Still, one fact could not be ignored: the president's image had taken a profound blow. Despite the ANC's rapid efforts to contain the fallout, damage control proved difficult. Senior ANC leaders condemned Money's remarks as reckless and destabilizing, accusing him of endangering the country for personal political gain. They defended Riosa as a leader guiding South Africa through unprecedented global and domestic challenges and pointed to his September 9 announcement of a massive infrastructure investment plan, funded through $4.93 trillion in pension funds, as proof of his commitment to economic revival. Yet the timing of his plan, unveiled amid rising public anger, only fueled skepticism. The optics of the parliamentary chaos overshadowed every talking point the ANC attempted to assert. Behind closed doors, the president's advisors scrambled to assess the damage. They urged him to project strength, dismiss the incident as political theatrics, and reassure investors and the international community. But even within the ANC's highest circles, insiders admitted that Money's challenge had landed a deep and possibly lasting blow. Coalition tensions between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, already strained since the 2024 elections, worsened dramatically. Past disputes, such as the DA's revolt in June after Riosa dismissed a DA deputy minister while protecting ANC allies accused of corruption, resurfaced with new intensity. Political analysts began speculating that the president's hold on power was slipping. Comparisons to Jacob Zuma's downfall grew more frequent, though many noted that Riosa's crisis was unfolding far more rapidly. While Zuma's fall took years of legal challenges, public protests, and internal party battles, Riosa's ordeal was accelerating under the pressure of social media's ability to turn outrage viral in hours. What once took years now unfolds in days or even minutes. Meanwhile, investors watched nervously. Foreign investment had already dropped by 20% earlier in the year, and images of lawmakers nearly coming to blows inside Parliament only worsened fears about the country's political stability. International headlines, already unfavorable after controversial comments made by Donald Trump earlier in 2025 about South Africa's social tensions, now painted a picture of a country spiraling deeper into crisis. Riosa's planned speech at the United Nations on September 23, intended to promote global cooperation, risked sounding hollow if delivered under the shadow of domestic turmoil and a bruised presidency. The political fallout from Money's defiance could unfold in several directions. One possible trajectory is escalation. If the Madlanga Commission's final report, expected later this year, directly implicates the president, South Africa could face nationwide protests reminiscent of the 2023 shutdowns, but potentially far more explosive. The public is angrier now, more economically strained, more distrustful, and more connected through social media networks capable of mobilizing instant masses. Another scenario involves resilience. Ramaphosa has survived storms before, including the failure scandal, and if he can deliver visible progress on infrastructure and economic reforms, he may yet endure, damaged but still in power. Some analysts argue that many South Africans, despite their frustrations, fear instability more than stagnation and may prefer a wounded presidency over an eruptive political vacuum. A third scenario sees Money himself becoming the lightning rod of controversy. Some political moderates argue that his actions constitute an attack on democratic institutions rather than a push for accountability. If this narrative gains traction, public sentiment could turn against him, positioning him as a destabilizing force rather than a courageous truth-teller. But the biggest wild card remains the Madlanga Commission. Leaks have already implicated senior ministers in shielding criminal syndicates and exposed dysfunction in police leadership. If further evidence links the president to these failures, or even proves negligence, his presidency could collapse under internal party pressure. Long before the 2027 elections, in the aftermath of the parliamentary chaos, the country entered a state of political introspection. Media outlets replayed the chaotic scenes in slow motion. Talk shows dissected every gesture and word, and columnists debated whether Money acted as a courageous whistleblower or a reckless agitator. Civil society groups called for dialogue, demanding transparency and calm discussions, while activist networks pushed for mass mobilization and even early elections. Public opinion, as always in South Africa, remained deeply divided within the ANC. Many senior officials privately feared that Ramaphosa's authority had slipped beyond repair and that the party's credibility sat at its lowest point in 3 decades. Opposition parties sensed an opening and were preparing for what could become one of the most contentious political seasons in the country's democratic history. Whether the president weathers the storm, resigns under pressure, or is pushed out by his own party remains unclear. What is certain, however, is that the events in Parliament marked a turning point. A day that began quietly ended with the nation confronting profound questions about leadership, accountability, democracy, and the future of its political landscape. The chaos inside the National Assembly will not soon be forgotten, for it captured a nation at the crossroads of anger and aspiration, demanding answers from a president whose future has never felt more uncertain.